Every morning, somewhere in America, someone pulls into a gas station, grabs the nozzle, and fills up their tank without a single thought about where that fuel actually came from. And honestly, why would they? It's always there, it works, life moves on. But I want to ask you something today that almost nobody ever thinks to ask. What if I told you that the liquid you just pumped into your car started its journey over 300 million years ago at the bottom of a prehistoric ocean? What if I told you it passed through one of the most complex industrial processes ever invented by human beings before it ever reached that nozzle? And what if I told you that the same black sludge that comes out of the ground also becomes the plastic in your water bottle, the rubber in your tires, the asphalt on your roads, the fabric in your jacket, and hundreds of other things you touched before you even left the house this morning? This is the story of crude oil refining, and once you understand it, you will never look at the world around you the same way again. Actually, before I get into all of that, there is something I want to mention while I'm thinking about it, something connected to exactly what we are talking about today. Because once I explain where energy actually comes from and how the whole system works, a lot of people start asking me the same question: what can I actually do about my own energy costs? And I put together a breakdown on that, a real one, not the generic advice you see everywhere. I will tell you how to get it in about 2 minutes, so stay with me, it is worth it. Let's start at the very beginning. Crude oil did not come from dinosaurs. I know that is what a lot of people grew up hearing, but it is actually a myth. The real origin story is somehow even more fascinating. Hundreds of millions of years ago, the Earth's oceans were teeming with microscopic life, tiny algae, plankton, microscopic organisms so small you could fit thousands of them on the head of a pin. When they died, they sank to the ocean floor and were slowly buried under layer after layer of sediment and rock. Over millions of years, the pressure and heat from deep inside the Earth cooked all of that organic material down, slowly, relentlessly, until it transformed into the thick, dark liquid we call petroleum. The word petroleum literally means rock oil in Latin, oil from the stone. And that is exactly what it is. But here's what makes crude oil so complicated and so interesting. It's not one single substance. It's a mixture, a chaotic blend of hundreds of different types of molecules, all jumbled together. Some of those molecules are tiny and light. Some are enormous and heavy. And each one behaves differently. Each one has a different boiling point, a different consistency, and a completely different use. The entire challenge of oil refining comes down to one fundamental problem. How do you take this messy, complicated mixture and separate it into all those individual useful things? That question took humanity centuries to answer properly, and the answer changed the world. Here's the thing most people never stop to consider. That same system that refined crude oil into the fuel powering your car is also the system that determines what you pay for energy every single month. And most Americans are losing hundreds of dollars to it without realizing there is another option. Message the word energy to me on Instagram, and I will send you the breakdown I put together on exactly how people are cutting that cost. I can't post it publicly because, frankly, the utility industry does not love this kind of information getting around. But you are watching this video, you are paying attention, and you deserve to know it. Just message energy on Instagram. Now, let me keep going because this story is about to get really good. The story of oil refining in America really begins in a small Pennsylvania town called Titusville. The year was 1859. A man named Edwin Drake was hired by a group of investors who had a wild idea. They believed you could drill into the ground for oil the same way people drilled wells for water. Most people thought they were out of their minds, but on August 27, 1859, at about 69 feet below the surface, oil came flowing up, and the modern petroleum industry was born. Now here is the part of the story most people do not know. Edwin Drake was not trying to make gasoline. Cars did not exist yet. What he was after was kerosene, a fuel that could be burned in lamps to produce light.
At that time, most Americans lit their homes with whale oil, but whale oil was getting expensive and hard to find. Kerosene, refined from petroleum, was cheaper, cleaner, and available in much larger quantities. So the very first oil refineries in American history were not fuel factories, they were lamp oil factories. Think about that for a second. The entire energy infrastructure that powers your home, your car, and your life today started because people needed a cheaper way to keep the lights on. That need has not changed. What has changed is whether you have to keep paying whatever the utility tells you to pay. But we'll come back to that. The refining method they used was surprisingly simple. You heat the crude oil in a big container. The lighter parts of the oil boil off as vapor first. That vapor travels through a pipe, cools down, and drips out the other end as a liquid. You have now separated one part of the crude oil from the rest. This process is called distillation, and it is ancient. Humans had been using distillation to make alcohol and medicines for centuries before anyone applied it to petroleum. It worked, but it was basic, and it was about to be pushed far beyond its limits. Because in 1908, Henry Ford launched the Model T, and everything changed. Suddenly, there were millions of cars on American roads, millions of engines that all needed gasoline. And gasoline, it turned out, was a relatively small fraction of what naturally existed inside crude oil. With basic distillation, there was simply not enough gasoline to meet the exploding demand. Engineers and chemists had to go back to the drawing board and invent something new. And what they invented would transform not just the oil industry, but the entire modern world. By the way, a lot of people who messaged me energy on Instagram told me they had no idea how much of their monthly budget was quietly disappearing into energy costs until they saw the breakdown. If you have not grabbed that yet, now's a great time to do it. You're already halfway through this video, and the next section is where it really gets interesting. A modern oil refinery is one of the most impressive things human beings have ever built. If you've ever driven past one at night, you know what I mean. Towers rising hundreds of feet into the air, thousands of miles of pipes weaving between them, steam rising everywhere, lights glowing in every direction. It looks like a city built for machines, and it never stops. A refinery runs every hour of every day, every single day of the year. Shutting one down, even for maintenance, is a massive, carefully planned operation. Inside all of that complexity, there are a handful of core processes doing the real work. Let me walk you through each one. The first and most fundamental process is called fractional distillation. This is the heart of every refinery on Earth. Crude oil comes in from pipelines or tankers and gets stored in huge holding tanks. Then it gets pumped into a furnace and heated to around 700 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, most of the crude oil turns into vapor. That vapor then rises up through a tall tower called a fractionating column. This tower is one of the most important pieces of equipment in the entire refinery. Here is how it works. The tower is hottest at the bottom and cooler as you move toward the top. Inside the tower are dozens of platforms stacked at different heights. And different molecules in crude oil condense back into liquid at different temperatures. So as the vapor rises through the tower and gradually cools, different groups of molecules turn back into liquid at different levels and get collected on those platforms. The lightest molecules float all the way to the very top. They come out as gases, things like propane and butane, the stuff in your lighter and your backyard grill. A little lower down, you get naphtha, which is used to make plastics and chemicals. Lower still, you get gasoline, the fuel in your car. Below that, jet fuel, the fuel powering every commercial flight in the sky right now. Then diesel fuel, powering the trucks that are delivering groceries to your store as we speak. Then heating oil, keeping homes warm across the northeastern United States every winter. Then heavy fuel oil, powering the massive cargo ships crossing the oceans.
And at the very bottom, the stuff that never evaporated at all, the heaviest residue. This becomes asphalt for roads and lubricants for machinery. 1 barrel of crude oil is 42 gallons. Out of that single barrel, a refinery produces roughly 19 gallons of gasoline, about 12 gallons of diesel, around 4 gallons of jet fuel, and the rest becomes all those other products. From 1 barrel of ancient black liquid, a whole world of products emerges. That is the power of fractional distillation. And here's the thing that gets me every time I think about it. All of that product, all of that energy, and the average American household still has almost no control over what they pay for it at the end of the month. The utility sets the rate, you pay the bill. Most people assume that is just how it works. The breakdown I put together covers exactly why that does not have to be true. If you have kids or aging parents at home, what I'm about to send you matters even more for your household. Message energy on Instagram and I'll get it to you. But distillation alone was not enough to meet America's hunger for gasoline. Even after separating crude oil in the fractionating tower, there are still enormous amounts of heavy, thick oil at the bottom that nobody has much use for. And at the same time, demand for gasoline keeps rising. So engineers asked a bold question. What if we could take those heavy, useless molecules and break them apart into smaller, lighter ones? What if we could essentially manufacture more gasoline out of material that would otherwise go to waste? The answer was a process called cracking. The idea works exactly like it sounds. You take those big, heavy hydrocarbon molecules and you crack them apart using heat, pressure, and special materials called catalysts. Catalysts are fascinating things. They speed up chemical reactions dramatically without being used up in the process. They make things happen faster that would otherwise take forever on their own. The most widely used version today is called fluid catalytic cracking. Hot, powdery catalysts are mixed with the heavy oil at very high temperatures. The catalyst breaks the big molecules apart. Smaller, lighter molecules come out the other side, molecules that are exactly the right size to become gasoline or diesel. When cracking was first developed and refined in the early to mid-1900s, it was revolutionary. For the first time, refineries could produce far more gasoline from each barrel of crude than nature had originally put there. It was almost like alchemy, turning low-value material into high-value fuel. And the timing was perfect because America's appetite for gasoline was growing faster than anyone could have predicted. What I just described is the part of energy production that the industry spent over a century perfecting at a massive scale. And most Americans have never questioned whether there is a smarter way to handle their own piece of that equation. The people who messaged me energy already found out what is possible. You can still catch up on that. Just drop energy in my Instagram DMs whenever you are ready. After cracking, there are 2 more important steps before any of these products are ready for you to use. The first is called reforming. Reforming takes certain molecules and rearranges their structure to improve how they perform when burned in an engine. This is how refineries produce high-octane gasoline. You have probably seen the numbers at the pump, 87, 89, 91, 93. Those are octane ratings. Higher octane fuel burns more smoothly and evenly inside your engine, which is important for high-performance engines that run under high compression. The reforming process is what makes that possible. The second step is called treating, and it might actually be the most important step for the environment. Raw gasoline and diesel that come out of the cracking and distillation process contains sulfur, and sulfur is a problem. When sulfur burns in your engine, it creates sulfur dioxide, which is a pollutant that contributes to acid rain and smog and is harmful to breathe. For decades, fuel in the United States contained significant amounts of sulfur. Then, the Environmental Protection Agency started tightening the rules.
Today, gasoline in America must have an extremely low sulfur content, and entire sections of a refinery exist for the single purpose of removing it. The treating process strips sulfur and other impurities out of the fuel until it meets the standards required by law. By the time crude oil has been distilled, cracked, reformed, and treated, it has been completely transformed. What came in as a dark, smelly, unusable liquid has become a lineup of precisely engineered products, each meeting strict quality standards, each destined for a specific purpose. That level of precision is exactly what makes this whole system so powerful, and it is also exactly why most people never question it. It just works. The fuel shows up, the bill arrives, you pay it. But this is the part they do not put in the news, because it is not profitable for the energy industry if you know it. There is a way to step outside of that cycle. Message energy on Instagram, and I will show you the full picture of what that actually looks like for a household like yours. Now, let's just sit with the scale of this for a moment. The United States has approximately 130 operating oil refineries. Together, they process around 18 million barrels of crude oil every single day. That is more than 750 million gallons daily. The largest refinery in the country is the Motiva refinery in Port Arthur, Texas. On its own, it processes about 630,000 barrels a day. That single facility produces more fuel than many entire countries consume.
Globally, the world uses approximately 100 million barrels of oil every single day. Think about what that means for a moment. Every day, every single day, 100 million barrels, drilled, transported, refined, and distributed to every corner of the planet. And most of us move through our lives completely unaware of any of it. We pump gas, we buy products wrapped in plastic, we drive on asphalt roads, we fly in airplanes, we heat our homes, we use medicines, all of it connected invisibly to a process that began in a Pennsylvania oil field in 1859. Oil is not just fuel, it is the invisible infrastructure of modern civilization. When was the last time anyone broke that down for you and then told you what you could actually do about your own piece of it? That is what the energy breakdown is. Practical, specific, built for regular American households. Message me on Instagram. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Are we not moving away from all of this? Electric vehicles, solar energy, wind power. Is oil refining becoming a thing of the past? It is a fair and important question. The honest answer is that the transition is real, but it is much slower and more complicated than the headlines often suggest. Yes, electric vehicles are growing. Yes, renewable energy is expanding rapidly. Many analysts believe that gasoline demand for passenger cars will peak and begin declining sometime in the next 1 to 2 decades. But here is what almost every conversation about this topic leaves out. Even if every car in America went electric tomorrow, oil refining would still be one of the largest industries on Earth. Because gasoline is not the only thing that comes out of a refinery. Petroleum is the raw material for plastics, for synthetic rubber, for fertilizers that feed billions of people, for pharmaceuticals, for cosmetics, for synthetic fabrics, for lubricants, for the asphalt on every road in the country. We have not figured out how to replace most of those things yet, and some of them we may not replace for a very long time. What refineries are likely to do over the coming decades is shift their product mix, less gasoline, more petrochemicals and feedstocks for manufacturing. Some refineries are already investing in technologies to capture and store the carbon emissions from their operations. Others are exploring ways to process fuels made from biological sources rather than fossil fuels. The refinery is not going away. It is changing, adapting to a new world, just as it has always done throughout its history. You now know more about energy systems than 90% of the people who will scroll past this topic today. The remaining 10% is what I put together in that breakdown. the part about what this means for your household budget, what the energy shift actually looks like for regular Americans right now, and what people are doing about their bills while the big picture sorts itself out. Message energy on Instagram and I will send it to you directly. So the next time you stop for gas, think about this. That fuel in the nozzle started its existence as microscopic ocean life more than 300 million years ago. It was compressed into oil by millions of years of geological pressure. It was discovered, drilled, and pumped to the surface. It was transported across oceans or through thousands of miles of underground pipeline. It was heated to 700 degrees Fahrenheit, separated by boiling point inside a tower taller than most buildings, cracked apart by catalysts, stripped of sulfur and impurities, blended to precise specifications, tested, and finally shipped to a tank beneath the ground under your feet. All of that so you can fill up and get where you are going. The history of oil refining is really the history of human ingenuity, of people looking at a raw, chaotic material from the earth and refusing to accept it as it was, breaking it apart, understanding it, transforming it into something useful, and then doing it again and again at greater and greater scale until it quietly became the foundation of the world we all live in today. That is a remarkable story, and it happens every single day, invisible to almost everyone. Now you know it. And here's my final thought before you go. Everything we just covered costs the average American household real money every single month. The fuel, the energy, the bill that shows up like clockwork no matter what the economy is doing. Most people accept it because nobody ever showed them they did not have to. If you made it to the end of this video, you are not most people. You pay attention. You ask the questions others skip. So do not leave this without grabbing what I put together. Message the word energy to me on Instagram right now. I will send you the breakdown directly. No fluff, just the honest picture of what is possible for a household like yours. Because you did not come this far in the video to walk away empty-handed. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and hit the bell. Every week, we explore the hidden history and science behind the things you use every day and never think to question. Drop a comment below and tell me what everyday thing you want us to break down next. I read every single one.